Welcome to Live Vita, the show for women who are ready to break free from diet culture, nourish their bodies intuitively, and reconnect with their natural rhythms. I'm Shay, a registered holistic nutritionist and founder of the Vita Method, where I help women support their gut, hormones, and metabolism through practical, evidence-informed nutrition and lifestyle changes, all without the overwhelm. So whether you're struggling with bloating, energy crashes, metabolic imbalances, or just feeling confused and out of sync with your body, you're in the right place. Here we'll talk about real nourishment, metabolism, slow living, and everything in between. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. All right, welcome back to the Live Vita podcast. I hope you're having a lovely week. It's really sunny again here, and I'm just living for this sunshiny weather. Today we have a really fun topic I'm excited to talk about. So again, kind of loosely following my free guide, which is available on my website. We're kind of on the topic now of what to eat. And I really like to take this approach of what can we add in rather than what can we take away. I think that's a really important lens to look at things when you're trying to improve your health and you're trying to improve your nutrition. Let's look at addition, not restriction. So today we're talking about traditional foods, diet culture, intuitive eating, and especially intuitive eating when you're neurodivergent. I'm just going to gloss through a lot of things, so we're not going to go super deep, but I am going to give a nice little overview here of sort of my ethos around these things. So today we're talking about what whole foods really are, why they matter, and how the type of food processing is going to impact your health. This isn't about like fear mongering, it's about becoming more informed, choosing better, and not aiming to be perfect. It's like, let's just improve a little bit. And I wanted to say here, like, if you're listening to this podcast and you're interested in improving your health, and you're on a health journey or a wellness journey, or you're trying to restore your gut health, or you're trying to get your metabolism going, whatever that may be and whatever that looks like for you, I think it's really important to know your why. And that's because the journey towards a better version of you is extremely difficult. And it's fraught with many ups and downs. And a lot of the time we just see, like on social media, we just see the good side of things. We just see people living like their perfect little life, and you're like, oh, I just wish I could have that. But you don't see like the struggles and you don't see the downs. And just as a little caveat to that, like sometimes on social media you see people living this like completely unrealistic lifestyle. Like I always get really annoyed with the health influencers living in some like beautiful tropical place and being like, just live like I do. And it's like most people don't have that level of privilege. And I think it's doing a disservice to people to be like, oh, you just gotta like quit your job and move somewhere tropical so you can do all these things too. Anyway, we could unpack that some other time, but I'm not saying, we gotta strive for that level of idealistic living, but in any case, like you see people who are living this healthy lifestyle and you don't necessarily see like what they've gone through to get there or like the struggles that they've been through. So ultimately you need to know your why, because you're going to end up hitting these problem walls, these areas that are really tough to figure out and to overcome. And ultimately my goal as a coach is to help you get through those things faster by being able to like sort of reflect back to you and show you things that you might not see yourself. When I've been on my own health journey and like I haven't had anyone reflect back at me, it's taken me much longer to kind of like figure out what is going wrong than it would if somebody who just kind of did a little bit of gentle reflection was like, hey, like, could it be this? And it's like, oh yeah, maybe it is that. So that's kind of my goal as a coach. And I also think it's really important to know your why, because sometimes the reasons why we're motivated to do something aren't strong enough. So like if you want to look good in clothes or you want to get your bikini body ready for summer, how many times have you wished that? Like how many times have you been like, I gotta just like lose 20 pounds so I look good in a bikini this summer? Like, do you do that every single year? Every single January? Are you like, this is my year to get fit? And it's like, it's just this cycle that keeps repeating where you're like, this is the year, and you're really motivated just to like look hot, like objectively, conventionally attractive. Is that the goal? Because that often is too shallow, honestly, of a goal. And for a lot of people, that's not actually going to like repair your relationship with food in your body. Even if you obtain that goal, a lot of people, and I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people who follow that like aesthetic kind of bodybuilding culture end up with a lot of issues around food, a lot of issues with body image, a lot of like disordered eating. So even people who are blessed, like genetically blessed with a conventionally beautiful body, can still hate their bodies and still struggle with food and still struggle with things. So like I think you need a better reason than I want to look good in a bikini. And again, that can be a secondary reason, like for sure. Like we all want to feel great in our clothes and in our bodies and stuff. But what that actually is, like underneath the feeling good in a bikini, is actually feeling good in your own skin, and it's feeling comfortable being seen and witnessed by other people. It's not taking other people's opinions to heart. It's being comfortable in your body to like enjoy sensation, right? Like it's like I want to be under the sun and I want to feel the sun on my skin. I don't want to cover myself up. I want to be able to feel that. I want to feel secure, like going for a swim. There's deeper motivators there. And it's so if you're like, I want to look good in a bikini, that's fine. But like look underneath that and start thinking about what is it that you actually want? Is it that you want to feel confident being seen and witnessed by other people? Do you struggle with other people's opinions of you? There's deeper things to uncover there, and it's like ultimately you need your motivator to be something like very deep. Like it's like I want to feel unshakable. Like it doesn't matter what other people say about me, I'm good no matter how I look, no matter how I'm perceived. Like I know myself and I'm okay. So please know your why and search for those deeper motivators, because there are going to be challenges and there are going to be pitfalls, and can you be okay with however it comes? And that kind of leads me to this point of view, because I think a lot of the time in wellness spaces I see people really kind of adamant about what their clients need to do, or like people are like, you have to do this, and if you don't do this, it's not good enough. I could say like an example, like cutting out alcohol. Alcohol's been on my mind lately because I've been drinking more wine, and I think it's completely fair to say there's absolutely no nutritional benefit to alcohol, like alcohol itself. However, there's other reasons why somebody might want to imbibe now and again, and we don't want to go so far into like a purity culture where it's like you can't do this, and if you do, you're bad, right? Like I see people come at people in the comments on Instagram where it's like you literally have poison, like it's literally poison, which is like not untrue, but it's more complex than that. And I think allowing people freedom to do what they want is really important. So you have to know your why, and you have to come from a place of like self-acceptance and appreciation for your body. And then also do the internal work to really evaluate your choices honestly. You can eat cookies, you can have alcohol, you can get fast food. Like nobody's saying you can't do those things anymore. I mean, there are people saying you shouldn't and can't, but that's not what I'm about. I'm about like, let's evaluate what this is doing for you emotionally, physically, spiritually. Is it bringing you physical discomfort that was worth emotional joy? Or is the emotional expectation underwhelming and not really worth the physical effects? You just have to kind of do this really deep internal evaluation and start looking at why you're holding on to things that are doing you a disservice. Does that have to do with your sense of self-worth, sense of self-confidence? I find a lot when we don't have a strong sense of self-worth, we'll be more permissive with things that are damaging to us because we don't really, there's like some internal subconscious cue there that's, I don't deserve better, but you do. And that's an ongoing journey, especially if you have struggled with that sense of self-worth. And that's really common in people who are neurodivergent, because it's like we've been treated like we're different and abnormal and don't belong for most of our lives without really understanding why. And so boundaries and gut health issues, boundaries between the gut, the inside and outside world can be a little loosey-goosey, and it's like something that we need to work on both physically, emotionally, spiritually in order to improve. So I hope this intro hasn't been like way too over your head, like too existential. But those are kind of like some thoughts I have about the foundations for approaching eating more like a whole foods natural diet. I think it's really important not to go into like the purity culture side of things, and it's important not to go too far where you start telling yourself, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, because you end up getting into these other restrictive habits. I've been there, and coming out on the other side, it's like I give myself permission to eat anything that I want. If I'm really craving it, I will eat it. There's certain things that I just like, I literally never think about eating. And if somebody offered it to me, there's no reason why I would say yes, because it's not something I desire. And desire has a lot to do with food as well, right? Like, what are your desires, and how does food fulfill that? There's lots of things I'll just say no to. Like, if you give me a McDonald's cheeseburger, I'm going to say no to that because I have no desire for that. But if you do have desire for that, then like, if you say yes to it, you need to evaluate what that's doing for you when you say yes, and like, how is it supporting your goals and how is it supporting your why? Like, is it in favor of your reasons for why you're pursuing this health journey, or is it not in favor of that? And you have to do that internal work, and that can be very challenging sometimes. So anyway, here we go. We're going to talk about what are whole natural foods. We're going to talk about processed food. We're going to talk about like what foods we want to focus on, what we don't want to focus on. And again, like I said, this is all coming from an approach of you have to do what's best for you, and it's not about restriction, it's about adding more in. And if you choose to eat foods that maybe aren't supporting your health journey or aren't supporting your body, they don't have the nutrition available in them to really like move your health goals along, that's okay if you eat those foods. I'm not going to come at you and say don't do that, but let's evaluate like, what is that actually doing for you, and is it a net positive or a net negative? Is it something that we can take away and replace with something else that hits the same desires or not? So that's your homework for today, is to kind of evaluate after you consume things. And you could do this with a lot of things. You can evaluate after you consume content, social media, the news, food, alcohol, relationships, extends to many, many areas. But evaluate, like, what is this doing for me? Is this moving me closer to my long-term goals? Is it taking away? Is it a net positive? Is it a net negative? Is it neutral? Like, did it balance itself out? That's your homework. Evaluate. All right. So what are whole natural foods? Our definition for this is going to be foods that are minimally processed and very close to their original form. Very simple, very easy. Whole natural foods are foods that are going to be close to how they were created, whether they were farmed, grown, hunted, if you can forage them, fish. They're things that you can find or cultivate in nature. So things like fresh fruits and vegetables, properly prepared grains, grass-fed meat, raw dairy, eggs, legumes, nuts, seeds, fermented food, any kind of food that your great-great-grandmother would recognize. I mean, we're pretty far into the generations now, so I feel like great-great-great-grandmother maybe would be more apt. But yeah, just traditional food. And there's a lot of evidence-based benefits to why this food is great for us. It's typically higher in fiber, higher in phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals. They're nutrient dense, and they have lots of antioxidants, polyphenols, different things that tend to be anti-inflammatory and also support our gut microbiome. They do this by supporting microbial diversity in the gut, which is a key player in digestion, immunity, and your mood. If you haven't listened to episode 2, Rewild Your Gut, the missing link between digestion, immunity, and mental health, you should really check that episode out, because I talk a lot about fiber and your gut microbiome and how it affects your whole body. But basically, we want to support our microbiome with a lot of plant-based compounds like polyphenols and antioxidants and a wide variety of other things, because these are going to support diversity in the gut, which is a key factor in your immunity and your mental health and even your mental clarity as well as hormonal health. So very important to start adding in more of these unprocessed or minimally processed foods. Fruits and vegetables are obviously the most easily accessible, most readily known things to add into our plates, but we also want to really include a lot of that animal-based foods as well, like grass-fed meat, raw dairy, eggs. Seafood is excellent. And we don't want to be afraid of these foods. We just need to have them in, reasonable proportions. And depending on what you have going on with your gut, there's certain things you might need to avoid for a little while, like grains. High fiber foods can be really damaging if your gut isn't ready for them. And then you just have to start from the basics, right? And just kind of build your way up. And that's something I work on with my clients in our coaching, is how to restore your gut so you actually can eat high fiber foods again and support that microbial diversity, because that's really important. And then we want to get into food processing. So I'm saying, like, we want to eat food that is natural, minimally processed. And something I see a lot in the like food freedom anti-diet space is people that say like all foods are processed, so it's all good. which is kind of a straw man argument. There's different levels of processing to food. Picking something out of the ground, like a plant out of the ground, and then eating it is technically processing it. You're mechanically processing it with your teeth and your saliva. And then, buying some mass-produced packaged food is also processed. And those two things are very, very different. So just because it's processed doesn't mean it's bad, but it also doesn't mean it's good. So we want to get into the nuance of this. Not all processing is harmful. Cooking, fermenting, drying, freezing, minimally processing food to make it safer, more digestible, fermenting cabbage into sauerkraut. It not only preserves the cabbage, but it boosts the vitamin C content, introduces beneficial bacteria. So then you're creating like a better whole food for your body. And it's the same with some roots like cassava root, cassava flour. It can be a great gluten-free option, but it's literally toxic if you eat it raw. So there's certain things where you actually do need to cook this food in order for it to be utilized by your body and not be toxic to you. The plant kingdom is very interesting that way. But another example would be bread. So a homemade bread, a homemade sourdough, we're using ideally organic, unbleached flour that's not fortified with anything. And then we're adding in some water, some salt, some natural yeast culture. And that yeast culture is usually going to represent the terroir of the place it was made. Sourdough starters in places like France, they have wild yeasts that have been cultivated over hundreds of years because they're just taking in more and more yeast from that particular bakery, that particular place, and it gives a really distinct taste to the bread that they create. And it's the same in your kitchen. Like, you're going to be taking in yeasts from the kitchen that you are in. So it's very interesting because that's going to complement your overall microbiome. It's like you're taking your environment and bringing it inside. Whereas commercial bread, you can have up to 30 ingredients, maybe more, maybe less, including emulsifiers, added sugars, preservatives like calcium propionate, and even dough conditioners. Let me try and say this, like azodicarbonamide. Azodicarbonamide, which is banned in the European Union, but it's not banned in Canada and the US. So, why do we even need that in our food? Even if it's considered food safe or safe in small quantities, why do we even need that? Why do we even want to be eating that? So things like this are kind of what I said earlier. There's certain things I don't even really desire or crave. You could give me a loaf of commercially made bread and I would have probably exactly zero interest in eating it. But if you gave me a loaf of homemade sourdough and you gave me some nice butter, I would probably want to eat at least half of that loaf of bread if I was pretty hungry. And they're totally different, and the way they affect my body, completely different. And learning to understand how food affects your body is, again, like I said earlier in the beginning of this episode, it has a lot to do with self-reflection and evaluation after the fact. So you can't learn by just being told. You have to actually do the thing and then evaluate. And all of us, if we're coming from the standardized Western diet, you're going to have to make changes and you're going to relapse. You're going to go back and eat a donut, or you're going to go back and eat cereal or whatever. And when you do that, you have to evaluate, was this a net positive for me, emotionally, spiritually, physically, or was it a net negative? And sometimes the physical symptoms that you have after eating that food are going to create a net negative situation, and sometimes it's just neutral. Sometimes it's okay. You have a bowl of cereal and you're like, that brought me so much joy. I'm reliving my childhood right now and I feel awesome. And that's great, but it doesn't mean that you should eat cereal every single day, because ultimately, if you're doing that every single day, you start having net negative effects. So it's a very delicate internal evaluation, and nobody can tell you what is going to work for you. You have to figure it out yourself. Taking a quick break to talk about something that could completely change the way you approach your gut health. If you're constantly dealing with bloating, sluggish digestion, cravings, or other imbalances with your metabolism and hormones, my free gut guide is the perfect place to start. It's a simple resource to help you restore digestion and rewild your gut in just 7 days. This will get your well-being right back on track. You can grab the gut guide as well as my other free resources at vitaessentia.com/free-health-guides. Also, the link's in the show notes. Now, back to the episode. But here's something that we should be mindful of. So ultra-processed foods like the commercially prepared bread with the 30 plus ingredients, they make up over 50% of the calories in the average Western diet. This is according to a study in BMJ in 2019. And these foods are often engineered to be hyper palatable, very easy to overeat, and offer little nutritional value. Another study, a 2019 study in Cell Metabolism, found that individuals consuming ultra-processed diets ate 500 more calories per day than those on a whole food diet, even when the calories, macronutrients, and taste profile was matched. So this ended up leading and leads to weight gain and increased inflammatory markers in the people who are eating ultra-processed diets. And we can see this in the obesity epidemic in North America that is slowly kind of spreading its little tendrils out into the rest of the world as more and more people reach for ultra-processed foods, and more people are starting to struggle with the diseases and disease-like states that come up from chronic inflammation. And I also want to mention that when we're eating these hyper palatable ultra processed food diets, they offer lots of calories but very little nutritional value. So again, this comes back to that evaluation, right? Like, it's okay if you want to eat a bowl of cereal because it's going to bring you some sort of like emotional joy and a memory or whatever. However, it's not offering a lot of like true nutritional value. It's not a living food that's like minimally processed and offering your body this like kind of quantum code of information to like be vibrant and alive. So what happens with this, especially if most of your food is ultra processed, it leads to nutritional deficiencies and you start running out of micronutrients, and this leads to weight gain because of how it affects the body. And when the body starts gaining weight like this, it's actually trying to protect you from starvation because the body registers that there's a severe shortage of supplies, right? It's like we're running out of supplies, which would be your micronutrients. Yet there's an abundance of calories or macronutrients. And this ends up dysregulating your thyroid and your metabolism, as well as your hunger hormones as the body becomes more leptin resistant, more nutrient depleted. Your mood goes down, you have more anxiety, more depression, more brain fog, you can't sleep right. And essentially your body is going into scarcity mode despite having an abundance of calories. And it's just like we're kind of starving from the inside, even though we have all this calorie information. We don't have the micronutrients to do anything with these calories. Like, what are we supposed to do with it? So we'll just store it for later because something bad is going on. Like, we're running out of supplies, you know? And so it creates this really messed up signal in the body where your body doesn't really know what to do with this information because it doesn't have the like quantum code that is tangled up in our fresh fruit and fresh vegetables and our fresh foods. It doesn't have that information to work with. And so it just kind of like stores everything away, preparing for some sort of disaster. So again, these foods are really calorically dense, but they're nutrient poor. And like I said, that's going to lead to fatigue, cravings, hormonal disruption. It confuses the body's natural hunger cues due to engineered flavors and textures. And again, having that abundance of macronutrients, but very little micronutrients. And the big deal about this is that the regular consumption of these ultra processed foods is linked to increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even certain cancers. And this was found in a study published in BMJ in 2023. It's not new information, but it's getting qualified more and more and more. We're starting to qualify this information and be like, yeah, that is true. And then we also see a lot of gut dysbiosis and inflammation due to additives like false sugars, flavors, emulsifiers, and then also the lack of fiber. Like, these foods don't have a lot of fibers in them. They don't have a lot of information in them. Like, if you can think of fresh food as something that carries a code, it's like your body is seeking these codes so it can kind of work in this complementary synergistic way with its environment, right? You're not getting any of that information from these foods. So the artificial flavors and emulsifiers and refined sugars, they can actually blunt your dopamine signaling and, like we already said, disrupt the gut microbiome. And that's going to contribute to cravings and anxiety and the depressive symptoms that I mentioned earlier. And this has actually been published in the Nature Reviews Gastroenterology and Hepatology. It was a 2021 study. So again, like, this stuff is starting to be more qualified rather than just like people saying, you got to eat whole foods. That lack of nutrient density is also depleting micronutrients from the body, like your B vitamins, magnesium, and potassium, which is so essential to proper hormone function and proper metabolic function. And then again, like your gut hormones, your hunger hormones, the signals that tell you that you're satiated, they get disrupted due to the hyperpalatable design of these foods. And it's really easy to overeat. Like who eats like 12 potato chips? You know what I mean? Like you end up eating like 20, 24, 50, the whole bag. And I'll just add, like, traditional foods can also be incredibly palatable, like butter, salt, delicious. You put that on something and it's going to be good. And you can totally overeat traditional healthy foods. You can overeat healthy foods. It happens a lot when you start eating in a pro-metabolic way. It's very easy to overeat, but it's not to the same degree, usually because you have higher fiber, higher protein, and eventually your hunger hormones and the satiation signals that your body gives out start kicking back in. And then it's just like a matter of listening to those signals and not overriding them. So again, this isn't like you can never have a cookie, you can never have cereal, you can never have chips. You can have those things, but it's about tuning in and asking, is this food supporting the way I want to feel? And if this kind of internal reflection is really difficult for you, there's some things you might want to look at outside of your relationship with food. Things like how you hold and maintain boundaries in your own life, your relationship to abundance and money or scarcity, and as well as emotional wounds or shadow wounds that have not yet been healed or acknowledged. And I think the boundaries is really important as well. Like, are you good at creating and maintaining boundaries with yourself? Like, if you say, I'm going to do XYZ, do you do it? Or do you kind of like fall off at XY and you let go of Z? And it's like, do you have kind of like leaky boundaries within your own life? These are things that we need to look at. And same with scarcity. Do you feel like you need to hold on to things like because it might slip away or you might not get enough? Or do you feel like you have enough of everything and everything is coming to you in its own time and it's okay? Those are sort of energetic things to consider that do ultimately affect your relationship with food and your body. So I wanted to talk a little bit about micronutrient deficiencies. I've kind of talked around it a couple times here, I've mentioned it, but ultimately micronutrient deficiencies act as a stressor on the body, which leads to fat storage mode. So even mild deficiencies like magnesium, zinc, iodine, B vitamins, they're signaling to the body that it's not in a nutrient-rich environment, which triggers a release of cortisol. That's going to impair your thyroid function and your metabolic flexibility. It's going to affect insulin and create insulin resistant states, which are often driven further along by chronic stress and chronic inflammation, which happens from eating these nutrient poor foods. And then there's also a protective slowing down of metabolism. So people with like slow metabolisms, we could consider them as adapted over time for survival, because if your metabolism was running really fast and you're in a famine state, you're gonna die. Like, there's no way around that. But if your metabolism is really good at slowing down and holding on, then your body can store more energy as fat to prepare for the ongoing deprivation that it's starting to pick up from the environment, right? It's like there's not enough in the environment, there's not enough. So we're gonna slow down and we're gonna hold on. And if you have ancestors that have gone through starvation or famine, your body's gonna be a lot more sensitive to this type of reaction. So your body's gonna be like, yo, everything's bad. Like, shout out to my Irish great grandmothers, but like, we're not being hunted down by the English anymore. I think it's okay. You know, it's like looking at your ancestry, looking at all these different things and piecing them together is kind of will give you a bigger clue as to what's going on in your sort of genetic code. And then that's going to be influenced by your environment or the epigenetics of what's going on around you. And studies have shown that links and deficiencies of magnesium, vitamin D, B complex vitamins, they lead to increased fat mass and poor insulin sensitivity. So one of the first things you can start doing is optimizing your circadian rhythm, getting outside in the sunlight, getting your B complex, getting your minerals, and just like you'll see very quick change around. It might take a long time for like big change, but you'll notice changes in terms of like your energy, your hunger, like things like that. So again, speaking to your metabolism, micronutrient deficiencies in iodine, selenium, iron, zinc, tyrosine, those are going to affect your thyroid hormone production, leading to like chronically reduced body temperature. So if your hands and feet are always cold, but everyone else around you is always warm, decreased metabolic rate. So it's like, again, your body's like slowing down and holding on, a lower energy output, not as much energy to do things. You might notice that you have more hair fall, your hair's thinning, falling out, your nails are kind of brittle, your skin is really dry, you're not looking like vibrant, and you have a lot more like like fatigue and cold intolerance. You just get really cold really easily. These are all signs that your thyroid is suppressed and that your metabolism isn't operating as it should be. And it really has nothing to do with the size of your body. So you could be a very petite person or you could be a very large person and be experiencing this. Same with mitochondrial dysfunction. So your cells ultimately are burning less energy, inflammation increases. It's just overall your body's just like holding on and it's not letting go. And the thyroid is exquisitely sensitive to nutrient depletion and psychological stress, which often go hand in hand, especially with chronic dieters or if you're really burnt out. And this is also going to be more sensitive in women in particular, because women in particular are more sensitive to stress, which has to do with your body's innate state of wanting to be fertile, which has nothing to do with whether or not you want to have babies, but your body as a woman, like it wants to be fertile because that is a signal that says like everything is safe and abundant and now is a good time to bring new life into the world, right? But if you're under this chronic stress, these chronic depletions, then your body is getting that message from the environment like it is not a safe time, it's a very bad time, we don't want to be fertile. And then that has all these downstream effects on your physiology, whether or not you actually want children really has nothing to do with what your body wants. Your body wants to be in this like optimal state of hormones and abundance. So you can have like that nice shiny hair and bright glowy skin and all of that. But like it doesn't really have to do with whether or not you want to have children. It's just like the default state of a vital woman is fertility, right? And it's like we're not going to have that if we're under this chronic stress and chronic depletion. So, okay, you're with me. We want to be eating more whole foods because we want to get those micronutrients in because we don't want all of those crappy downstream effects that happen from not having enough nutrients in our diet. So we're going to eat more whole foods. But what about pesticides? So there's a lot of research into pesticides, and this is a difficult topic in a lot of ways, but I think it's really great that over the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen so many more places turn towards organic, even like big conventional names turning towards organic, which is really great, but you also have to be a little mindful of greenwashing and whatnot. But we're not talking about greenwashing in this episode, but do please read your labels. Especially if you're buying packaged food. Just because it's labeled organic or just because it's labeled natural doesn't actually mean it's free of bad ingredients. They might just be like bad ingredients that are labeled organic, which again is why like it's nice to just prioritize whole foods because there's no ingredient list, lettuce or onions, whatever. So pesticides. A 2020 systematic review in environmental research linked higher pesticide exposure with increased risks of hormone disruption, reduced fertility, and gut microbiome imbalance. And again, reduced fertility is not great for female physiology, even if you don't want to conceive. Like I said, our bodies naturally want to be in a fertile state. Glyphosate, one of the most widely used herbicides. It's on your grass. It's in our food. It's the active ingredient in Roundup, the world's most widely used spray. You know, you see the perfect lawn. I talked about this a lot in the microbiome episode of the podcast, but you see that perfect lawn, not a single weed. There's pesticides on that lawn. You do not want to be rolling around in that grass. You want to roll around in the grass where you see like different types of grass and like little weird flowers and little weeds. That grass is probably good to go. GMO crops like corn, soy, canola, they spray Roundup or glyphosate right on there to help with drying. Non-GMO crops like oats, wheat, and legumes, especially before harvest, they spray it on to dry them faster in a process called desiccation. And this pesticide or this herbicide, glyphosate, it's been linked to endocrine disruption, gut microbiome changes, and even possible carcinogenic effects. So we want to look at organic farming as much as possible. Foods grown without the use of synthetic pesticides, without the use of sprays. The food itself often contains higher antioxidant levels and a better nutrient profile. And then buying local and seasonal, even if it's not certified organic, often results in better nutrient density and a lower chemical exposure. And if you can't buy like local or seasonal or organic and like you do all your grocery shopping at Walmart, which is like no shade on you, you got to do what you got to do. Focus on the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 list. I will have those lists linked in the podcast notes where you can download a free copy of them to take on your next grocery trip. Try and support your local farmers where you can. And then just make sure you're peeling and washing your produce really well to try and get off that extra residues. Part of the concern around glyphosate in particular is it disrupts the gut microbiome. And again, if you've listened to the episode all about your gut and your immunity and your mental health, your microbiome is a huge player in your overall wellness. So the reason why you're probably like, well, how can they justify this glyphosate if it has all these terrible effects? And some of those terrible effects include the fact that it's a chelator, so it binds to important minerals like magnesium and zinc and iron, removes them from the soil and from your body, which means less nutrient density in the food that's coming out of that soil. And then, of course, it's flushing it out of your body, which is leading to this micronutrient deficiency that we spoke of earlier. So how is this safe for people, you ask? Well, it disrupts bacteria by inhibiting the shikimate pathway. Say that with me, shikimate pathway, which is a crucial metabolic pathway for bacteria, fungi, algae, plants, but it's not a pathway in human cells, which is how it's justified as being safe for people. Even though we now know very clearly from science research evidence in the last 10 years especially, that we coexist with bacteria and fungi. We have bacteria and fungi living in our bodies, in our large intestine. We have our whole microbiome, and that microbiome is affecting our mood, energy, metabolism, everything else. So if we're constantly exposed to something that inhibits the shikimate pathway, which is crucial for the metabolism of bacteria, then what's that doing in our gut? You can draw your own conclusions from that. But there is some research that shows that glyphosate can selectively kill beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, and it allows more harmful or opportunistic strains to flourish. There's actually a lot of evidence that people who are exposed to pesticides early in life will end up with things like celiac disease later in life. So look back if that's you and think, could you have been exposed to a lot of pesticides when you were growing up? It also, like I said, is an endocrine disruptor, so it disrupts your hormones, and it impacts your thyroid, estrogen, testosterone, cortisol regulation, and this can contribute to infertility, PCOS, early puberty, and other hormone-related imbalances, and it's a possible carcinogen. So the International Agency of Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen. There's ongoing lawsuits, you can look these up, especially in the US, that allege a link between glyphosate exposure, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and they're resulting in billions of dollars in settlements. It's pretty wild, actually, that we still use this product, especially knowing that it's water soluble, so you might spray it in one area, but through our waterways and watersheds, it's draining and entering other areas. And some broader issues with pesticides is that they're linked to metabolic dysfunction. So chronic low-level exposure has been linked to insulin resistance, fatty liver, obesity. The compounds act as obesogens, which interfere with normal hormone signaling and fat storage processes. So they end up creating their own sort of hormonal signals and again, disrupting what would normally be going on with your hunger hormones, creating more hunger and more fat and more insulin resistance, more leptin resistance. And then there's also some issues with neurotoxicity and developmental impacts for children. So there is some research that supports the idea that environmental exposures can influence neurodevelopment, especially during critical windows like gestation. So things like prenatal and early life exposures to certain pesticides associated with ADHD, autism spectrum traits, learning disabilities. The organophosphates in particular are potent neurotoxins even at low levels, so there have been studies on this. There was a key finding in a study called Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder and Urinary Metabolites of Organophosphate Pesticides, published in 2010. And the key finding was that children with higher level of organophosphate pesticide metabolites in their urine were significantly more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. There was a 10-fold increase in urinary excretion of these metabolites, and that was associated with a 55% increase in the odds of ADHD diagnoses. And same with autism. So there was a study published in Environmental Health Perspectives, and that was in 2014. And the key finding there was that mothers who lived near areas of heavy pesticide use, especially organophosphates and pyrethroids during pregnancy, were more likely to have children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders or developmental delays. And this isn't to say that these things are the cause of ADHD or autism, not at all. I'm not saying that. The studies aren't saying that. But they're saying that this exposure is part of a complex web of things that maybe set up a young brain to have these differences in processing. So again, this is epigenetics, not genetics. It's like maybe your genetic gun is already loaded, and then the things that happen in your environment are enough to pull the trigger. Right. There are a lot of residues left over in common foods. So oats, strawberries, spinach, chickpeas, they often test high for glyphosate and pesticide residues. Even organic crops can contain a little bit because of the drift. Like I said, this kind of is water soluble. It gets into the water, or it drifts over on the wind, and it ends up contaminating other crops, but usually to a lower level. So just something to be mindful of, especially if you have access to local food. Try and get that as much as possible, because most often they're not using the same level of pesticide or sprays in their foods. So that's a lot, right? Like, that's kind of scary. And again, the goal here is not to be afraid. Now, I'm going to ask you a quick favor. If you love this episode, I'd appreciate it if you took a moment to leave a review, give me some stars, or share it with a friend who needs to hear this. If you have a topic that you'd love me to talk about, contact me at shay@vitaessentia.com. And if you're ready to start rewilding your gut and improving your well-being, don't forget to download my gut guide. You can find it under the free resources section of my website. And all the details are in the show notes. I think it's good to remember, like, your body knows how to take care of itself. It knows how to detox. It knows how to do these things. We just need to help it as much as possible, especially in our modern day where we're exposed to so many things all the time. I think it's really important to have a very nutrient-dense diet and a very, like, stress-reducing lifestyle as much as possible. Even if you have, like, a lot of high-stress things going on, it's like, what can you add into your life to help mitigate or break up some of that tension within your body, while also supporting your body with really nutrient-dense foods. Again, this isn't like you can't have something. It's just, let's evaluate what that is doing for you. Is it a net positive, net negative? Is it neutral? Is it canceling itself out? Is it moving you towards your goals, away from them? Like, just things to evaluate. Because diet culture often teaches us to remove things. Take away sugar, take away carbs, take away the bad foods. But studies have shown that adding things in to nutrition, as opposed to taking them away, focusing on what we can include, they improve long-term adherence, and ultimately it reduces disordered eating patterns that come up from restrictive diets. Again, like I said earlier, it's like if your why is just like, I want to look good in a bikini, that's not deep enough for most people. Like, it's like that might get you through a few months, it might get you to the summer, but then what happens after that? Do you just end up doing the same cycle every single year? And if you're like, oh yeah, I do, then it's like that motivator isn't deep enough. It's not a deep enough reason. And like, you need to go under that. Like, what is it that you actually want? Because it's not the bikini per se. Maybe the freedom, the confidence, the comfort, like physical comfort. Like, maybe you're physically uncomfortable. You have to go a little bit deeper. So we want to focus on adding in more color on your plate, more mineral-rich foods, more animal products that are of a high quality and nutrient-dense, more traditional fats and fermented foods. And when you add in nourishing foods, there's actually less room and less desire for those ultra-processed options. Like I said, if you put a McDonald's burger in front of me, I would have no desire for it and I wouldn't eat it because it just isn't something that I want. And then the same, if you put like a loaf of conventional bread in front of me with some like margarine, like, I'm not gonna eat that either, because again, it's not something I desire or want. But if you put like a freshly made loaf of sourdough in front of me with some like cultured butter from like the cow next door or something, or whatever, just some like nice high quality butter, I'm probably going to eat that because that is delicious to me and I desire that. So what ends up happening, the more that you move away from ultra processed foods, the more your taste buds change, the more your cravings change. And it's not about like good or bad, it's just like, I don't want that. Like, I don't desire that. It doesn't do anything for me. It just, I don't want it, And if you're somebody who's really snacky, or you reach for a lot of snacks, or you reach for a lot of processed foods, this can be really hard and it can be really challenging because maybe there's a lot of comfort in that. Maybe there's a lot of emotional reasons why you reach for that. Maybe it reduces stress for you. So again, like, you have to look underneath what it is and kind of evaluate, like, why am I doing this? Like, what is the motivation for this? Is there something else that I can do that's going to bring me closer towards my goals rather than taking me away from them? Because we all kind of know what we should be doing, more or less, but it's like, how do you actually do it? That's the problem, right? Like, if it was easy, we'd all be perfectly healthy and thriving, but it's not easy, and it's confusing and complicated, right? And I think saying that and honoring that, it's okay. Like, it's okay that it's confusing and complicated. You can figure it out. And if you need help to figure it out, there's lots of people out there who are more than happy to help you. And I'm one of them, I'm just one of them. So here's a little more homework for you. Rather than saying, I can't eat that, there's nothing I hate hearing more than I can't eat that. Especially when it's like in a diet culture-y kind of way. There's no food allergy or anything. It's just somebody being like, nope, can't eat that. Ask, what can I add in that would nourish me more deeply today? Maybe that's starting your day with a blood sugar balanced breakfast. Maybe it's adding a little scoop of fermented vegetables to your plate. Maybe it's swapping out seed oils for traditional fats. Maybe it's getting a healthier version of something. Maybe it's cooking one homemade meal this week using ingredients that you got at the store that are like in season, and that's a whole new thing for you. Learning to cook is half the battle. Like, if you don't know how to cook, that's okay. There's a lot of ways to learn to cook, and it can be very, very simple. Eating whole, natural foods is actually very simple. Half the time my plate is just like a snack plate, and that's okay. It's a nutrient-dense snack plate. Because again, taking things away, restricting, being like, I can't eat that, being like, oh, I can't eat sugar, I can't eat carbs, I can't eat dairy. And there's no like severe allergy reason for it. It's just somebody told you that you should take these things away. That triggers a lot of stress and fear around food. And we want to do the opposite. We want to nourish. We want to feel a sense of safety. We want to feel a sense of confidence around food. We want to know the cause and effect. Like, if I eat this, then I'll feel this, because I've done it before. I've evaluated it enough times that now I'm empowered to make those decisions, because I know if I eat X, I will feel Y. Whether or not that's positive, negative, or neutral, I'm the only one who really knows the answer to that in the given moment, and I'm the only one who can decide this negative outcome is worth the emotional positive. Like, if I'm out at an event, right? Like, I'm like with a family for a celebration and I want to imbibe in whatever the offerings are, I'm going to know if I do XYZ, I'm going to feel XYZ, and I can evaluate, is this worth it to me right now? Right? And that's being autonomous, and that's being empowered with food, because you know the answer. And you have control over the situation, and you can make choices from a place of nourishment and safety and abundance, and it's okay. So after all this talk about pesticides and negatives and scary things, that are out there lurking, what can we add in that's going to support our bodies to detox, to get rid of the things that we don't want to hold on to anymore, to speed up a little bit so we're not just holding on and waiting? There's some nice foods that we can add in to support a gentle detox. Things like cruciferous vegetables, so broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, arugula, radishes. These all support your liver detox enzymes via compounds like sulforaphane and indole 3-carbinol, which you can call I3C. And they're especially helpful in the phase 2 liver detox, estrogen metabolism, and balancing hormones. If you have a lot of gut stuff going on right now, and just in general, I don't recommend eating these foods raw very often. Arugula, radish, and a little bit of cabbage would maybe be the exception to that, like small doses of raw cabbage, great. But in general, we want to be cooking these vegetables, because if we don't cook them, they can actually negatively impact the thyroid. They are overall wonderful additions because they do support that detox. They do support clearing out excess estrogen. So we don't want to avoid them altogether. I remember making this mistake early on in my health journey because I was like, oh, these are going to screw up my thyroid more, and I'm already trying to recover this slow metabolism. But no, it's like you can just cook them. And then, like I said, minimal processing, right? In the beginning, cooking is a way of processing food, and it makes it safer, more digestible, unlocks some of the nutrients. So add in those veggies, cook them, and see how you feel. And sometimes, like if you're really struggling with gut stuff, you might have to remove some of these vegetables for a little while and work on building up your gut health before you can add them back in. And when you do add them back in, make sure you're cooking them for sure. And then we can get on to our fresh herbs. So cilantro, parsley, basil, these are all really rich in chlorophyll, which help bind and remove heavy metals and toxins from the body. Cilantro in particular has been shown to mobilize certain heavy metals like mercury from the tissues. And you can add these to eggs, soups, make some nice salsa verde, make a nice chimichurri. One thing to note though is if you're trying to get pregnant or if you are pregnant, you do not want to take high doses of parsley. So don't be eating parsley by the spoon because it can actually promote contractions in the uterus. On the flip side of that, it can be really great if you're waiting for your period and your period is a little delayed or a little late. You can do a bunch of parsley to kind of get things moving. So another really great food is beets and beet greens. The beets are going to help support your bile flow, which is essential for proper elimination of toxins through the digestive tract. The bile essentially emulsifies things and carries it out of the body and helps the liver with processing toxins so it can be carried out of the body. It's also, beets and beet greens are rich in betalains, which are antioxidants that are liver protective. And you might be like, but what about the oxalates? What about the oxalates? If you do not have an oxalate problem, I would not be worried about beets. That being said, I always say that we should be eating complementary foods. So usually when you see beets, you see them with goat cheese or you see them with cream, in a borscht. We just have this traditional understanding of food and a lot of traditional cooking where foods are paired naturally with things that complement them. So eating beets with a high calcium food source like goat cheese or Greek yogurt, that calcium actually helps bind up the oxalates and move them out of the body. So the oxalates aren't leaching calcium out of your body. They're not creating those stones and they're not creating those problems or those calcium oxalate crystals that can be really damaging on your joints and tissues. You can use beets to grate raw into salads, roast them up with some garlic. Lots of great options for beets. So then we can add in bone broth. Everybody, I think, has heard of bone broth by now. It's really great because it's rich in glycine and glutamine, which help support gut repair and phase 2 liver detox. They encourage tissue regeneration. Bone broth helps soothe an inflamed or leaky gut. And again, leaky gut is really common with a lot of pesticide exposures, so we want to really work on the gut health here. That being said, if you have a lot of sort of allergy things going on, like if you have a lot of hives, if you kind of break out, if you get a lot of histamine symptoms, bone broth might not be your friend just yet. You might want to work a little bit more on gut health first before you can tolerate things like bone broth, because bone broth is very high in histamine, and if you don't tolerate histamine well, then you don't want to be introducing high histamine foods. But again, you can work on this. And there's some other daily supportive habits that we can do to add in to our life. So maybe the whole nutrition thing is a little overwhelming right now and you're like, I can't even fathom doing any of these changes. Maybe you can pick one. Maybe you're like, I'm going to eat a little more protein at breakfast, and that is your one change. Great. Maybe the nutrition thing is too much right now though. And I think if you're living a particular type of lifestyle and you're not really taking care of yourself, nutrition first isn't always the best, because there's other things that play a huge role, right? If you aren't getting good sleep, you need to work on that first. If you're not getting good hydration, you should just focus on trying to drink more water. So one of the most powerful ways to create new habits is to stack them with habits that you're already doing. And I guarantee if you look at your life, you're going to see a whole bunch of habits that you do every single day. And some of those habits are going to be positive, some are going to be maybe negative, and some are going to be neutral, right? So it's start with the positive habits you already have and then start stacking them with new habits. Figure out a couple things. One, what is your why? Why are you even doing this? Why does it matter to you? Find a very substantial reason for that. It can't be anything superficial. It needs to be something that is going to carry you through your life. It needs to be important. And then once you find your why, start evaluating. When you take certain actions, when you do certain things, evaluate after. What is my why? Evaluate, is this bringing me towards my why or not? And then start with one thing at a time. What is the easiest habit that you can start stacking into your life? What is something that you're already doing every single day for good or for bad? And then start stacking new habits into that. And there's one thing I wanted to talk about briefly here, because we're talking about evaluating. We're talking about listening into our bodies after we eat, after we do something. And that can be really difficult, especially with like hunger and fullness. So it can be difficult in a lot of different ways, but we're going to focus in on if you struggle with like, when am I hungry? I forget to eat. I don't even know if I'm hungry. I overeat all the time because I don't know when I'm full. I want to take a moment to talk about that. Like, you're like, I get it. I get this whole foods thing, but like, I don't even know if I'm hungry. I don't know when I'm full. I don't know if this is good for me. I don't know if it's bad. Like, I don't really know. Everything feels bad. Maybe everything is bad, you know? And then it can be really hard to figure out, like, it's not clear. So I want to talk a little bit about this relative to especially neurodivergence, but even if you don't identify as neurodivergent, like, that's okay. This might help you out too. There's research from Frontiers in Psychology, this is 2022, found that interoceptive awareness is reduced in individuals with ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, and eating disorders, making hunger and fullness harder to interpret. This is really common, especially if you have a history of dieting, yo-yo dieting, or if you've spent years disconnected from your body's signals, if you tend to dissociate, if you tend to override like internal signals. Maybe you don't even realize you're doing this. You probably don't. It can be really hard to kind of like tap back in and be like, what is my body telling me? So we want to approach this with a lot of curiosity and gentleness. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just reflection. So here's some ways you can begin to reconnect with your body without relying solely on traditional hunger cues or fullness cues. Because honestly, if I hear another health professional say, just stop eating when you're 80% full, I'm going to be like, can you explain to me where the math is on that? Or like show me the manual where I can find my fuel tank gauge so I can see when I'm at 80%, because I have no idea what 80% means. Like, I don't know what that means. So I talk about this a lot, but first we want to anchor your meals to your routine. Instead of waiting for hunger, try eating by the clock. So I do recommend eat breakfast within an hour of waking up, a nice protein-rich, fiber-rich breakfast, something balanced. I go through this in my guide. And then from there, eat every 3 to 5 hours throughout the day. Something small before bed, perhaps, and at least be following this like rhythm or routine way of eating until you start recognizing your own hunger and satiation cues. Starting out this way is a great place to start. This is actually where I started in order to like learn my hunger again, and in order to like learn my actual body cues. And by eating in this patterned way, your body starts stabilizing to that pattern, and then eventually your internal messaging will come back online and you'll start feeling like very distinct hunger, very distinct fullness, and it'll become intuitive, but it won't be intuitive at first, and that's okay. Just try eating by the clock. And if you're like, yes, I want this, but oh my God, this feels overwhelming, I need support, I'm here to help. There's lots of people out there ready to help, but I'm here. And if you want to reach out, send me an email, write to me on Instagram. My Instagram is shay.vita, or join my program. I hope that you found this episode informative. I hope you got something out of it and were able to wander around with me through all of my thoughts about nutrition and wellness. And I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening, making it to the end. I'd love it if you left me a little review, and we'll talk soon, my friend.